Good night, Region 6, Region 5. Good night, Burbies. Welcome to another Alliance on the Move. I'm here with two executive members, Dr. Vincent Adams, and of course, Member of Parliament Jurita Fernandez, who will be our host and moderator for this evening. Good night, Jurita.
Good night. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you fine.
Okay, great. Good night, guys. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Alliance and the Move program. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, discussing all the pertinent matters, everything that's happening in our country. Every single week, there's so much to discuss. Like there is not a week that goes by that we have a light set of work to come and discuss with you. So tonight, rather being no different, tonight we have a packed program for you all. It's always a pleasure to be here in the company of none other than David Patterson, the General Secretary of the Alliance for Change, and also Dr. Vincent Adams. You know, Dr. Vincent Adams, one of our mentors, I would say, for us young parliamentarians in the Alliance for Change and young members of the Alliance for Change altogether. Both
Yeah. He's Dr. Will, isn't he?
both gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure of being in their presence and learning so much from them. So I encourage you all to do your part and share the program as we begin this evening, so that more persons will be able to come on board and benefit from a very fruitful discussion that we are about to have. So without going further, let me just give an opportunity to both Mr. David Patterson, followed by Dr. Vincent Adams, to give opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Jurita. Vince, as I said, it's always my pleasure to be back on the Alliance to the Move. It's always my pleasure to try and bring a semblance of a different perspective of what's happening in our country. But everyone knows what's happening in our country. We're facing tremendous pressures, economic pressures. The prices are skyrocketing. Everything is out of control. Crime has risen. The sugar workers are still off the job. The rice farmers are protesting. So there's nothing really good to report. Right now, the Parliament hasn't sat for almost, what's it, 2.5 months. That doesn't augur well for this country. But once again, I'm just here to bring out perspective of current news topics, so that people can at least have some different opinions. So when they reach with their families tomorrow, when they have a discussion, they at least hear both sides of the story. So it's always my pleasure.
Thank you, David and Joretta. It's always a pleasure to be here in this program. Talking to the folks on Belize and throughout Guyana. I'm going to say it a little bit different to David. Instead of a second opinion, I'm going to say we are always here to let you know what the truth is, because that's been a problem with this government in terms of not telling the people what the truth is. Of course, in addition to the issues that David has raised, one of the breaking news here in the last few days was the issuance of the Yellowtail project, which is the fourth project that was in the making. And there are still lots of concerns, and there's no question. I don't think there's no question that Exxon is calling the shots for the government of Guyana. And we're gonna get into some more details, and of course we've been talking till the sky is blue, but the government just decides that they're going to ignore us and try to fool people, and so we're going to continue to let people know what the truth is, and hopefully they're going to understand and realize what the facts are. So that's why we're here, is to bring the people the facts.
Well, most definitely. And on that note, I want to tell persons that are joining us right now. What we see, we have hundreds of persons that already joined the program, and I want to tell those persons, like I said earlier, to share the program because I would say that Dr. Vincent Adams, for those of you that do not know, Dr. Vincent Adams was a former head for the EPA here in Guyana. He was removed, and he is the technically sound and skilled person. He's the best that we had ever have before, and I believe that I don't see us going in a pathway to have anyone that is could ever amount to the amount of knowledge Dr. Vincent Adams had. And I'm just not saying that his credentials speak for itself. And also want to say when it comes to matters of oil and gas, he is our resident expert here. And also, we have Mr. David Patterson here, that sits in the National Assembly, member of Parliament, that shoulders responsibility for oil and gas also. So, quite an in depth discussion we're going to be having here this evening as it pertains to the oil and gas sector. But definitely, I want to just get right into the discussion, and Dr. Adams, we're all following. We've all been following in the media all the discussions at the level that is in the public. I must say everyone has been say having a lot of say, and we saw a bit of what I must say an attempt at consultation. We saw a 6,000 plus page document being said to have gone through in 5 working days, and then we saw the decision to not have the EIA actually happen, and for the Yellowtail project to proceed. And what are your thoughts on that altogether?
Well, I don't know where to begin because, normally when you're in discussions, you like to discuss things that even have some iota of credibility. It's like trying to argue with a 5-year-old kid. How do you start that argument when it's just pure nonsense? The EIA is what you call the Bible of any project, especially major project. David had a taste to me when I was at EPA. I never cut him any slack. He had to do an EIA, for if whether he was building a road or not. I told him up, well, Dave, no, you have to do an EIA. But the thing is, in those days, before this administration, everybody followed the law. These days, the developer and the ministers are calling into the EPA and telling them, hey, you know what? No, you don't have to do an EIA. So it's totally politicized, which is not only bad. It's dangerous for the people of Ghana when it comes to their health, when it comes to their safety, and when it comes to their environment. That's the reason why you have an EIA. And the rule that I set at the EPA was as long as there was any doubt. The only reason when you don't do an EIA is when you're absolutely certain, 100% certain that there is no risk. But as long as you have a doubt, you've got to go do an analysis to look at all the risks. And when you don't do that, especially when you have projects such as, drilling 12 wells offshore or building a bridge, how could you not want an EIA for building a bridge? And even the bridge that if you recall, for that bridge in 2020 November, the EPA technical folks, the engineers came out, they published a 30-day notice in the newspaper saying we will have an EIA, and then the next thing you know, or the EIS, the next thing you know, a couple of months after, somebody overruled. The engineers didn't even know who overruled them, but it was in newspapers that we're not going to be doing an EIA. But it's so that, for example, even the Yellowtail, you went ahead, published the Yellowtail. Well, we've permitted the Yellowtail. Well, there's some major issues, even besides this whole thing about the process for getting to that final document. In terms of, it's incredible. Somebody must be,
Speed reading.
Time to be reviewing a document. It has to go to the EAB for their recommendation to the EPA. But apparently, when it was submitted from the consultant who wrote it, it took 3 days for the final approval. Those things would normally take months because the EAB has to review it in depth, and then they make a recommendation to the EPA. The EPA has to review that in depth, looking at all the documents and everything. So Here, they maybe we've got a bunch of smart people that smarter than we think of. But even out, but that's only one issue within that. Even outside of that, and you know what galls me and should gall every single member of the Guyanese public, is that these people have the nerve and the gumption to come out and brag about some things in that document, such as, hey, you know what, we're gonna get full coverage insurance. Well, they're using the same exact language that I put in the Lisa 2, which says 12. I mean, I know it, just if I'm reading it. 12.1 says thou shalt have insurance. The part 12.4 says the EPA must routinely review that insurance policy. Those are the exact words, to make sure that it's being kept up, there are no changes, and you guys are paying your premium. 12.5 says that anything over and above that insurance, the parent companies have to cover that insurance in plain language. They started up Lisa 2 without those documents in place, without any insurance. So now they're coming out, we're going to go get insurance. It's just as if it's a fraud. And then they expect the people now to believe them. You're going to go out bragging where you're going to get full coverage insurance in the yellowtail when it's in there. I put it in there in the Lisa 2. They use my same language in the Lisa 2, the PIR and everything. You started up Lisa 2, ignoring the laws of the land. I know you expect people to believe. Just believe us. We're gonna, we're okay with yellowtail when you're not even obeying the law in Lisa 2. So that's the trust, the lack of trustworthiness with the fibs that they tell people and try to con people into believing these type of things. So that is our issue. So those are some of the issues that we've got to deal with here.
Jurita, just allow me
Yes,
to.
Dave, most definitely.
Yes. No. No. And this is an important point that I want, well, myself and Vince should address, because what the PPP are doing and what they're going in the bottom houses, what they're telling their supporters, they're not saying it publicly because they know the, but they're going to say that if they do a proper EPA or proper EIA and its entire assessment, that will slow down progress. That it delayed them getting, and they've been saying this, so they've been making it, couching that anybody that objects to what's happening now is against development. And of course the misinformed would understand that, because there's all the saying that why would we be against them building a bridge? Why would we be against them awarding a contract? So I think what people have to know is that you're not against development. You're not trying to slow anything down. You're not. It's just simply saying, listen to me. If you're going to build a bridge, and the bridge is going to be 2 kilometers long, 2.5 kilometers long, you have to ensure, because everyone knows about the Demerara Harbor Bridge that floats away at times.
And this is make the point, Dave, that this is a different bridge, because that's got it in it.
Yes, it's not the same bridge. So, but everyone knows that there can be issues when you change the status quo. You change the environment. You put a man-made structure over nature. There are issues. So therefore, these are what the EIAs and the assessments are there to ensure whatever you do, that you do it correctly. So therefore, we don't have any issues going forward. It is not in any way meant to slow down progress and those things like that. So that's what they've been peddling. Oh, Dr. Adams, Patterson, Fernand, they want you to get this, they don't want you to get that, they want you to go through all these studies and those things like that. And don't worry with us, we get you a slam bam, thank you, man. But look, and people, Barbicians, you have a prime example. The Berbice Bridge, you have a prime example. But when you rush a project, what happens? That bridge is there, I see it out of the central, the quarantine chamber of commerce are now begging, asking for relief on the tolls because, of course, high gas things. But what the Quarantine Chamber of Commerce did not mention is that we under the APNU, we put a order on the bridge stopping them from increasing the toll. The PP hasn't removed it, but when we did it, we were told that we are anti-private sector
Private sector. Yep.
and those things like that. And I'm surprised that the quarantine and all the business chambers haven't asked the government, what really are you doing with this bridge? Are you going to they were shouting, are you going to privatize it? It's a bad investment. Will it continue to be a millstone around the Barbicians' neck? I have seen nothing at all about that. But when we were there, they had so many different theories what to do. That bridge, I mean, they went into a deal. They made a very bad deal, a public-private partnership. They just like they're trying to do now, Vince, with the new Demerara Bridge. They allow their friends and family and cronies to have control of the bridge for 21 years. It's about 15 years now. Their friends and family took all the money from from NIS, who hasn't got back any money. They can't make a profit, and what they want to do is try in the last 5 years triple 840% increase in the tolls, and then they're now saying, okay, well, fair enough. We went into this. We can't make a profit. The government should bail them out. That's not how businesses work. But back to the point of it, Teresa, the question of us being anti-developmental because we insisted things be done correctly. That's one of the things that they're going around saying to their supporters all the while.
Well, here's what I have to say about that. And this also ties in to my initial comment when I said that Exxon is running the show. Because the one rule when I was at EP, and by the way, the administration, when I was there, the AP and UAFC administration did not interfere with EP. No way. You remember I told you, David and the rest of the ministers, I used to tell them,
you have to toe the line.
Absolutely. So there was no interference whatsoever. And I'm sure many folks remember that we shut down big companies. Exxon had to shut down their operation to not to go to zero flaring and those type of things. Here is the problem. Exxon, these EIAs, they're international. You know, you have to manage these things in the United States. Those things could take up to 2 years, and these companies have to abide with it. All we are asking Exxon to do is not to do anything less than you have to do in countries such as the United States. So we're not asking for anything special. We want our people to be treated as citizens of Guyana, just as how they're treating people in the United States when they've got to abide by whatever laws. When the regulators, and I can tell you because I was a regulator in the United States, when we said jump, they ask how high. In Guyana, it's the opposite. They're telling us to jump, and we're asking us how high. They're treating us, as a matter of fact, even on these regs, we know even the trade union had a problem. They're treating us as second-class citizens, less than I guess minimum wage. We had to eat left.
Yeah, that was horrible. Yes.
From they're treating that's exactly so that sends a message as to how they regard Guyanese. And here, I have to be honest, I ain't got no qualms with Exxon because I have qualms with the government who set the rules and should make them comply with the laws of the land, but they're allowing them to do whatever they want. So it's not Exxon, because Exxon can't go. And when Exxon go into another country, they're going to try to do whatever it takes to save money. They don't care about people. They care about making as much money as possible. That's why you have governments. But right now, the Exxon is basically running the show, telling the government what to do. In the meantime, they don't care about the people's health, safety, environment. Look, I mean, all they want is to make money, and they're treating us as second-class citizens. So for them to be saying that somehow they're going to hold up development, they're not holding up development in other countries. This year, the safety of people and the environment and the health standards are more important than the money that they want to make. That's more important. What happens when Exxon is gone? And they're only going to be here maybe between 20, 30 years. What is going to happen to Guyana? Half of Guyana's population right now is below 20, 26 years old. What is going to happen to that entire population when they all have cancers or whatever diseases they're going to have? That's going to be because we are not doing the right analysis to understand the risk so that they can operate, to make sure that they can mitigate against those risks. Nobody is stopping their operations. We all support it. We all support oil production and everything. As a matter of fact, that oil contract, as you know, regardless of the criticisms, it was signed and signed by APNU AFC, and it was signed with the intention of developing Guyana, but developing it with it, also along with developing it in parallel, to make sure that you do it and you do it right. You do it and you do it right, and they both can come together. And that's been our narrative. You can do both together, and that's what's done in other countries. So why can't you? That's the issue. They want to treat Guyanese. The government is allowing to treat Guyanese as second-class citizens. So what did Mia Mottley call it? What did Mia Mottley call it? You can't to be tenants in our own.
Yeah, that's
So
a powerful.
that's exactly what's going on here. That's the issue. Is not we don't want to stop anything. We just want to make sure that people health are protective. We don't want the little kids of today, by the time they get to 30 and 40, we have a community that is not healthy.
Yeah, well, on that note, I want to also bring into the discussion the fact that I know the Alliance in the Move program is being currently aired live in Berbice, and I know that one of the issues that persons, especially the fishermen in particular, has
Yep.
been ventilating. One of the complaints they've been
Yep.
ventilated in the media is that they are of the belief that the offshore drilling is affecting their ability to catch fish, and because of that, even one headline was reading that it's forcing them to go fish in out of our zone, basically in illegal waters, if I can say put it that way. So a lot of times we have these discussions and we talk about the environmental impact assessment and all of these things, but persons may want, well, how does it impact me? And this is just a prime example of how it impact the ordinary Guyanese man and woman, the ordinary Guyanese family. The fishermen, their families are being severely impacted right now. This is a direct example of what we're talking about. But what I want to also say at this time is that the Minister of Agriculture is now saying that they're doing a study to see whether or not that is so. I know I'm thinking to myself, how foolish this can be. You are saying we're not going to do environmental impact assessment, but then when complaints are coming in after the fact, now you're going to do a study to see if something is true, something that would have been predetermined through an environmental impact assessment
That's
and
right.
methods and remedies put in place so that the fishermen and their families that they are being severely hampered. The economic hardship is even worse than it was before with the current state of affairs in the country. So when persons are wondering, how does this affect me? These are the ways in which it affects persons altogether. And I want to invite David Patterson to give his comments on that particular issue.
Right. So there are two issues here, and the very first, and this the call about the fisher folks having diminished catches started about a year and a half ago, or I don't know. Vince could enlighten me if he heard those things while he was at EPA.
No, no, not at that time.
Right. So it started
Yeah.
about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And you would have thought, and I'm sure when Vince gets a chance, he'll tell you that you would have
Mm.
thought an investigation would have been done. The very first responses were, is the opposition. Default opposition, is opposition trying to be. Then the fisher folks, not only in Berbice, I'm talking about in Demerara and Hope, up the lower East Coast and those things like that, started complaining about not only that their catches were diminished, that the oil and gas boats were chasing them out of their traditional fishing grounds, if you could you call that, foreign vessels pulling up and say you can't fish here and those things like that. And back to what Myanmar to say you can't be a tenant in your own country. So when the first complaint came about they being chased off, then is when after the fishermen complained, you heard that Exxon is laying some fiber optic cable and for their own safety. No announcement about that before. Next, so and just as you said, so they've done no investigation. This year, this budget, Vince, you might know about it. They set out they're using $200 million to do something called fish traps, which is, and from my understanding, it's just like putting a big seine in the river, you know what I mean, trying like it, and then tell the fisher folks go and try your luck within that area of the seine. But then, Jerita, here's what has happened. They did no studies. Then they realized that, of course, in Berbice and those areas, that it's affecting persons. So they went over almost hand in hat and begging to the Surinamese, please issue our fishermen license to go and fish. And that and it was a big headline. Hasn't been done. Because Suriname, the Surinamese are under almost the same, their fishermen are under the same sort of pressures we have. And they wouldn't be done. They said that they made a big announcement, just like they did when we reopened Sugar, we given 500 fishing licenses. So the fisher folks are sitting down there in Berbice, up in Quarantine or Riala. Some of them are even over in Suriname waiting on these fishing licenses. I saw today, he said, oh, they will be issued soon. No, it will not be done, but that's what they do. They keep you, the carrot, the stick in the carrot, they put the carrot in front of you, these license, you stay on your corner, you be quiet, don't complain, you will get these fishing license. So, but the real tragedy is that fish is our cheapest source of protein in the country. And when these things started happening, it's hard to reverse. Very, very happy to tell you how hard it would be to reverse. If, I mean, not, and I don't know if the operations are, but if it is, it's very, very hard to reverse when the fish started migrating, stopped spawning, and those things like that. So we have to have an answer now. If not, it will decimate the entire industry, and the knock-on effects on our people would be tremendous.
Yeah. Just to add a couple of things. Yes, first of all, David, you're absolutely correct. In my time, as a matter of fact, what we set up in my time was a 24-hour hotline that we had to respond. If they're calling overnight, the next morning we pick up all the calls and you respond immediately. It didn't matter where it was. The staff went out to see for themselves. We had an immediate investigation. In this particular case, and I have gotten calls too from the fisher folks. I obviously, I don't have any data or evidence to say it's directly tied to it, but somehow people can draw their conclusion with a correlation, etc. But you need a study. Here's what's interesting. When the government say they're going to do a study, I want to know who is going to do this study, because here's what's in the yellowtail permit.
Yes.
The yellowtail, the first thing you have to do is to have a baseline study. Okay, what exists today out there, so that you can define. Because if let's say later on you get a spill, or you're gonna have to come up with quantified damages, and the only way you can quantify damage is knowing what existed before to see what you have on top of that now. Well, we do not. The only baseline study we have is for Liza 1. Before Liza 1 was Exxon. Well, when I was there, that was one of the things that was in my budget for us to go do an independent Exxon, the developer, never does a baseline study for the government. Okay, you know what's in the permit? The yellowtail permit.
I saw that Exxon will do the study.
Exxon will do a baseline study. Now, folks, tell me, this is Exxon. So we're going to trust Exxon, which is exactly getting back to what I'm saying. Exxon is calling all of the shots and telling the government what to do. As a matter of fact, when I read the language in these permits, I have no doubts.
It's not written locally. Yeah.
Because I know we have nobody at EPA who understand that kind of a lingo in the petroleum world to be writing those types. I have no question. They can say whatever there's no question because I was there and I was the one who used to do all of the writing and the discussions in it. But anyway, so we've got Exxon now, who will be doing this baseline study. And remember, the baseline study is saying, well, okay, here's what I have now. So if anything happens, you want to take me to court, you could only get damages for what's over and above the damage. Well, so when Exxon does a baseline, you tell me, isn't that laughable as to what that baseline study is going to do? But that's exactly what is going on. The water, and let me tell folks what's the risk here. Like I said again, I can't tie, but somehow there's, there could be a correlation or there couldn't be. Or there could just be a coincidence that this is happening. It never happened before, but as soon as this, so let me tell you what's going on.
It's highly improbable, I would say.
Well, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. What's raising the doubts. When I was there, when we were doing the Payar, as a matter of fact, this thing came up even when I was doing the Lisa too. But we decided to do it with the Payar, which was the third project. We had, when we were reviewing it with Exxon, we had the EPA, GGMC, the Department of Energy, and believe this or not, during that transition period, because we had already started it. So those were the team that was working the Payara review. When from that 5-month transition to the new government, they decided that they want to hurry up this thing. They brought in a Canadian consulting. I can't remember the lady name, but
Alison Redford.
Yeah, exactly. She had her technical expert. So they came in as part of the team. Do you know what that team unanimously agreed and directed Exxon about? That there shall be no dumping of produced water in the ocean. As a matter of fact, remember that lady Redford was even more adamant than I was because she was livid to stop it. We had a meeting with Exxon and say, hey, no, you cannot dump. Lo and behold, even though we met with Exxon and said this, when I left in August, in September, we went ahead and signed that permit and is allowing them to dump produced water. Let me tell you what produced water has, which is what's going on here. First of all, it's 3 times it's hot as heck.
Vince, you tell them how the water, how it's produced in the first place.
Oh yeah, okay.
Right.
When you produce oil is produced with oil also comes with water and the gas, and of course we hear about the story with flame, which is another issue, but the oil comes up with water, and it also comes up with gas. So this water, of course, and what you do when you bring up all of this stuff, you got to separate it. So you separate the gas. Well, the gas separates itself because it's like a Coke bottle. It's under pressure, and when it comes up to the surface, you release that pressure. It comes off by itself, but you collect it or you flare it and you re-inject it. Water is different. You've got to separate the water from the oil. So that water now is supposed to be re-injected back into the reservoir. That's what all normal international practice, standard practice says that's the case. The World Bank standard says you should only dump water if it's not economically feasible or if it's not technically feasible. Well, we know it's technically feasible because all you got to do is re-inject it, and we know it's economically feasible because when we asked them they didn't want to re-inject. We said, well, okay, what's going to cost you to put the equipment on the ship? They said $300 million. Well, of course, I don't believe that number, but nevertheless, even if it's $300 million, you're making hundreds of billions. And you're telling me, because this is what I told them. I said, are you telling me that the lives of the Guyanese people is not worth $300 million when you're making hundreds of billions of dollars? Well, of course, even though we directed them that we should, boom, they went, they signed off. After I left in August of 2020, they signed off, the government signed off the permit in 2020, in September. 1 month after I left, they signed that permit, and they said, no, it's okay, go ahead and well, here's what that water has. And we're talking about thousands and hundreds of thousands of gallons. Over the life of these fields, they'll be dumping billions of barrels, not gallons, barrels, and each barrel is 42 gallons. They'll be dumping billions of barrels of water into the ocean. Here's what this water has. The water is hot. It's like 3 times the ocean, the temperature in the ocean, 2 to 3 times the temperature in the ocean. It has radioactivity. It has all kinds of toxic metals that you can lead, mercury, barium, just name the toxic constituents. That's why we say you have to re-inject it. Here's the other part. When it comes up to the surface, there's a treatment on board, and that's another funny story, where you're allowed to treat the water, and when you dispose of it into the ocean, you're allowed between 29 parts per million to 42 parts per million of oil in it. Well, what that means, for every million of barrel of water that is dumped, there is 29 to 42 barrels of pure oil. If you do the calculations over the life of the field, you will have dumped hundreds of thousands of barrels of pure oil into the ocean. So you can't tell me. And then Exxon is writing their conclusion. Well, there's no impact.
Only a teaspoon.
Yeah, exactly. It's nonsense. And then the vice president. Here's the funny part of the vice president. The vice president had the nerve, and I don't know if it's just ignorance or if he's just being misinformed. Or the vice president keeps saying all the time that how when I was there or the previous government, we never had treatment for the water. Well, I tell you what, if I was Exxon, I would ask for a public apology, because then that's indicting Exxon. The only treatment that occurs, as I said, is for that oil, to take that oil concentration. Nothing else is treated. So when he talks about treatment that was never there, it's always been there. As a matter of fact, it's the same exact language as in every one of the permits, except that we were changing that to say, I don't care what, you're gonna re-inject it back into the reservoir. They're not doing that, and they're dumping all of this water. So when these fisher folks are complaining, and then you're telling me now that you're gonna allow Exxon to do these studies to tell me that there is no problem. I mean, this is ridiculous. They really don't care, but the people, all they're doing is supporting Exxon cause, which is the only objective here, is to come in here and make money without any regard for our health, safety, and the environment. So so that's that's, I thought I had to tell you that story there about the vice president going out and say, well, we never had treatment before, but now we're having treatment. I mean, how could a vice president?
But yeah, Vince, they're very good at that. They're very good at that.
I mean, how could he be telling, well, we never had treatment before?
Remember, Vince, he said it out that we give them permission in the permit to flare 14
billion cubic feet.
You know what I mean?
And what was funny,
even Exxon had to come out and say that's a lie. But
yeah, Exxon had to throw him under the bus and say, wait a minute, David, you remember even in Parliament, the minister with you.
Yeah, said it out and said the exact same thing when we said, find it, prove it, show it.
Yeah. Exxon had to come out and say, wait, I don't know what 14 billion they talk. They had to throw them under the bus. See, stop that. See, he should stop talking about this nonsense about they're now treating the water. We said you will not dump water which doesn't require treatment, period. You're going to have to re-inject it back in the reservoir. But now he's saying, it's treating it, but only for the oil, but it's only treating up to a certain concentration. We will have, over the life of this field again, folks, besides the hot water and all the toxic, everything that is in that produced water, we will have hundreds of thousands of barrels of pure oil dumped in the water. You can't tell me that's not impacting the environment.
Well, specifically what we were discussing, I'm listening to Dr. Adams walk us through very brilliantly what goes on there. And I'm thinking to myself that it's very difficult for any reasonable person to assume that wouldn't affect the catch for the fishermen, because all that you're saying, the very fact that you're saying that it was right after they came into office. I think you said 1 month after you left Exxon, and that they signed that agreement allowing the water to be dumped into the ocean. And I'm thinking to myself that if we were to look at the timeline also, since from when the fishermen started complaining about low catches, I think that there are definitely correlations. There's a I don't know what other study is being done. I know the Minister of Agriculture is set to be doing a study right now. I don't know who is doing the study, what are the parameters of the study, and all of those things. But like you rightly said, there wasn't even a study done to determine the baseline. So we don't know where we're going to be moving forward with that. But persons that are on right now, like I said, we have hundreds of persons joining us at the moment, listening. Make sure that you share, let persons be able to understand for themselves. And this is the reason I want to say this at this time, David and Dr. Adams. You know, a lot of times I make comments about having experts do the technical experts in place to do their job. And listening to Dr. Adams right now, we see why we need the technical experts on board. A political person, a person without the technical expertise, will not know how to actually put together any piece of documentation that is going to be protecting us as Guyanese people. And I dare say everything that you're saying right now, it is very scary to think about how we're moving forward as people in this country, because it seems as though all those documentations that have been signed is not none of them is geared at protecting the interests of our health and well-being altogether in this country.
Yep. Here's another funny thing. You know, again, I can't believe that the vice president goes around with a straight face. Again, I've got to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's just being misinformed or through ignorance.
I'm way past that. I'm way past that.
The guy. Here's another thing the guy said. Oh, they're now doing this cradle to grave. You know, if cradle to grave hit him between the eyes, I don't think he's gonna know what it is. And basically, what it is, folks, when when I was there, when I got there, Exxon they're generating billions of tons of waste on ship that is coming on shore, is being treated, and then is taken to the landfill, etc. So what Exxon was doing was saying, okay, here I'm gonna hand over my waste to Tiger Tank or whoever else they have, and I wash my hands. You know, you guys deal with it. I said, absolutely not. You will be responsible for that waste from the time you generate it, for the time of final burial, and anything after that. So that was what I introduced. As I made as a rule. So so we were doing the procedures and the planning and everything during the time, you know, it was during the time that I was transitioning out. So we had some draft plans, etc. Would you believe that the vice president is going around and say we never had? Now we've got this cradle to grave thing that he's developed. I mean, it's so I don't even know how to describe it, because here's a guy who's supposed to be setting the example for truth telling to the people and leveling with the people, and just totally misrepresenting it. You know what I mean? It wasn't even necessary for him to be even talking about it. Just accept it, claim credit, say, hey, you know what, this is what we're doing. But you don't have to tie it into politics and say, well, they never used to do it, but we're doing it now. Just like how we said, you know, we never used to treat the water. Heck, we said we don't want to have to treat the water. We have to re-inject it. We say, well, we're treating the water now, and now we say, well, they never used to do cradle to grave. The same thing with flaring. He goes around saying, well, they never used to charge just $45 a ton for flaring. Well, you know why? Because we said there must be no flaring. And let me address this $45 a ton. It's the biggest hoax there is.
Oh, yes.
And then this guy Rutledge believes somehow that we are really ignorant. I listened to him up to a couple of weeks. He said, well, we were only flaring 2%. Well, of course, 2% sounds like a really low number. Well, we all went to school and did a little bit of arithmetic. We know 2% of a big number is, guess what? A big number.
Big number. That's correct.
Okay. So 2%. So when you get down to the rate, they're down now. Up to for months now they've been flaring like 16 million cubic feet a day. So now they're down to 4 million cubic feet a day. So let's deal with the minimum now. With this is 2%, 4 million cubic. Do you know how much fine they're paying for that 4 million cubic feet? I did some rough calculations. $8,000 per day. Guess how much money And all they've got to do, because every barrel, for the listeners, every barrel of oil that comes up, it brings, remember I told you about the water, it also brings 1,000 cubic feet of gas with it. So you can do your calculations to cut back 4 million cubic feet per day. All you got to cut back production by 4,000 barrels per day. That's all you got to do. So if you're producing Lisa 1, 120, I don't know how much you're producing in Lisa 2, but just take Lisa 1 by itself. If you cut back by 4,000 barrels, you're going to be producing 116,000 barrels per day, not the 120. So that's a small price. It's a small price to cut, but it's greed. Okay, so guess what? If they do that to get zero flaring, if they cut back by 4,000 barrels per day, guess how much money they will be losing? About $500,000. So they're paying $8,000 to make $500,000. That's what we are allowing them to do. And then we're bragging about this measly, when at the same time we're putting our people's health and the environment at risk, not only ours, but the Caribbean and the rest of the world, because we go and make a big splash at the last global
COP 26.
COP 26. How are we going to be cutting back? And which is a fib. Where's the plan to do it when you're emitting all this? And this is only one development. We're gonna have the entire offshore. They're littered with, so you can multiply all of these things by the numbers that they're planning to have 10 FPSOs. Now we welcome those 10 FPSOs. I do, David do, you do, but they must be done in a safe and environmentally sound manner. So when he goes out there and he brag about this measly 45, he's selling out our environment for a measly $45 per ton, so that Exxon can make $500,000. So that's the deal we're getting. So when he talks about it, the people ought to know and pull him up on it.
Well, very, very informative. I continue to say, I know this particular program, we are going heavily on the discussion in oil and gas, especially pertains to what is going on with the Yellowtail project. I know, Mr. Patterson, I want to invite you to make your comments. I know you're eager to make some comments.
Well, I also wanted to address not only the bigger issue, that's what Vince started off with. Exxon is calling the shots. We're ceding our sovereignty. We're allowing them and allowing these things to as we mentioned, the fishing can damage our environment all the well. Of course, it also breeds corruption. With all this money here, there's also breeds corruption. That we don't really know exactly what's happening. The audits, they're supposed to audit Exxon, they haven't done it, and they're making excuses. You know what I mean? The Lisa 1, Lisa 2 project is $9 billion, $9.5 billion. You know what I mean? Somebody gets 2% of that big numbers, the big numbers. But what we did as an administration when we were there, when we got into, forget everybody speak about the contract, but there's certain safeguards we did. We entered something called EITI, which is the Extractive Industry Transparency Institute. And this is a worldwide institute that prescribes certain requirements for extractive industries, oil and whatever it is, and they have guiding principles. We hired, just like Vince, we went out internationally, and Dr. Rudy Jagupat, I think his name was hired.
The expert, technical expert.
That's right.
Came, set up the institute because we never had it before.
Yeah.
We got accepted into the whole EITI International, commended for our early strides because of transparency is one of the big things in it, whereby you let the contract access information, the people must know exactly what's happening, because in certain countries, what they found that it's so opaque, it was a breeding ground for corruption and those things like that. So Dr. Rudy Jadipat came and he set it up, and we're doing well. PPP comes in, fires him unceremoniously, He released a few. He ran into difficulties with the minister because the minister started trying to instruct him who should come to the EIT, who should he share information with and who he shouldn't. And they replaced him with none other than Prem Nazir, who was working in the office of the president all the while. Knows nothing, absolutely nothing but the oil and gas industry. He was the guy that blacklisted. Here is a man that blacklisted Tablook News, heading an agency about transparency. You see how laughable there's somebody that has done that is now going to head an issue on transparency. So, folks, it's not only Exxon; it's all of the safeguards and all the guardrails that were up and there to protect not only the country but the government and the people's money, and they're being dismantled.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
but
The other thing too, David, even at the forum, you would think, well, okay, forget about the public stuff, but even the forum where these things should be discussed, you brought up every time you bring up a motion for discussion.
Yeah.
Even for discussion.
Yeah.
You know?
It's yes. Even the parliament, which is supposed to be sacrosanct, which is supposed to be the place where it has been every motion you bring up, and I say I have no qualms about it because in the public domain, the speaker of the assembly, who's supposed to be neutral, irrespective of however he got the job, he is sort of the balance and the scale between the opposition and the government, and we have a set of rules, and he's supposed to follow. He's supposed to be. We have the most unbalanced speaker, I think, in the history of the country. I mean, he absolutely does nothing that, according to the books. I mean, I can remember, Jarita, your very first motion you put in, which is
it didn't see light of day.
Didn't see light of day. Didn't even explain to you. Just threw it out. And when you said, but you can't, we're grown people. You're not a god. You're not. I mean, you're not endowed with certain way. He says, "Well, I'm the speaker." When I challenge him, I personally challenge him on the motion. Why have you deleted clauses? Because he said, "Oh, it has to be facts." So I said, "But these are, you could Google them. These are facts. Anybody can Google them." He says he has no obligation whatsoever to explain anything to me or anybody else. He's the speaker. Ada. You know, with GT we say Ada.
Yeah.
So even the parliament where we're supposed to get our records, preserve it for prosperity, so the persons will know we raise this point. We in the hope of making Ghana better, we raise these issues on flaring, we raise these issues on insurance and those things like that. This is the government official position, because they can deny that they actually said something when they're just speaking on the newspapers. And so when you go into parliament, you are recorded verbatim. You take a vote and it's prescribed and it's enshrined for prosperity. So therefore, that is why we wanted it in there. But the speaker, the most unbalanced speaker ever in the history of the country. I have no qualms in saying that. I know he looks at these programs, or he has people looking at these programs, and then he gets up and says, criticizing the speaker is not.
Well, it's not. One of the things I want to point out about that view is that this is not a view that is just shared by us or the opposition altogether. This is a wide view, and I think one of our leading newspapers actually did an entire editorial basically stating the same thing about the
international media as well too, and the international agencies as well. He I mean, and you would have thought that, well, all right, at least let me have some sort of, thing. The next issue, Will, Vince, and I want you to, and I want your viewers to know this here. I brought a motion it was in February 2021 on flaring. And the night before the motion, the Attorney General wrote to the Speaker, and he says, there's a court case going on in, I think, in the United States. I can't remember where the court case was. And it's a sub judice, which is a rule in Parliament which says that you shall not discuss, because you have Parliament, you should not discuss in Parliament and debate a matter that is before the court. Great. So my motion has been 2 years, and I haven't been able to speak with him because
What about this or the paper?
yes, yeah. So, but Vince, it's interesting. People in Berbice have to know that the Natural Resource Fund Act was passed, and there's a major commotion in November to December last year. There's a court case filed against that act. It will be interesting to hear and see what the same speaker, and he also did this in Region 5. You have to remember this as well. The Shadow Minister Gita Chandan Edmonds brought a motion on the Henry Boyce killing, and they got an independent Henry Boyce murders. I shouldn't say killing. They got independent pathologists and those things like that, and to bring. But because the case is on in court, the speaker ruled she cannot bring that case to light. It will be interesting to see how this neutral, balanced speaker reacts now that there's a court case. There's a on for the against the Natural Resource Fund. It's in front of the court.
Yep.
And I bet you, and I could bet my last bottom dollar, he will come in the most fancifulest thing, doctrine of necessity, something he has been endowed with the most divine power to overrule whatever ruling he's done, and he will not follow what he does, what he has done, and on several cases, several issues that he would have ruled. If it's before the court, it cannot be and moved ahead. He find a reason, you bet. So we wait and see.
What's going on here, Dave? And what I think the Guyanese people ought to pay attention to is that the government doesn't really care about governance. They care about what they want as their agenda, and their friends. They don't care about what's best for it. Here's a government. This is what it just boggles the mind. A government that has a one-seat majority runs it as if it's a 100-seat majority, instead of trying to get folks and from the other side involved in the decision-making process. They talk about one Guyana. Now, folks, here again is another hoax. This whole thing about one Guyana. Is that one Guyana? Even the Natural Resource Fund, they even refused. It's probably where the biggest decisions have got to be made for the country, not for 50% of the country. You cannot say that you're ignoring 50% of the country, because that's basically what you're saying, that those who represent 50% of the country will not be allowed to be part of the decision making. You don't want you refuse to have anybody on the NRF,
anyone nominated, yeah,
as to how you're spending this money that is supposed to be for the whole country. With the past administration, they had a group of 22 people to cover the entire spectrum of everybody. It's the same thing. You had the biggest oil and gas conference in Guyana here recently.
Yep.
Nobody from the other side had the qualifications. They had it. So which was totally ridiculous for them to be saying nobody on the other side. They're saying 50%. Yeah. As long as the thing is, and when they say that, they don't only mean the politicians. Trust me, they do not want anybody who they think
is critical,
voted or support the other party. It depends on how you look, and because even here's the other thing. You know what the vice president said? Because EPA, and deservedly so, they're in the newspapers every day, and people have seen that it's totally politicized now. You know what the vice president said a few weeks ago, which was totally nauseating. Do you know that the vice president decided he was going to play the race card? You know what he said? That I and others are only criticizing the executive director of the EPA because he's East Indian. That's what he said in his interview. That we only my mother is East Indian to start with. And most of the people who write stuff in the newspapers and critical of the EPA, not even of the executive director, because they know that he's just doing what, he's got to do what they tell him. So, I have sympathy for the guy. I was in a better position where there wasn't any interference whatsoever. So I was allowed to do what I'm doing. But that's what he said, that they're only doing it because this guy is East Indian, which means, here it is that this guy who's supposed to be
An expert.
uniting the country, nothing could be more divisive than
Mm.
playing this race card. He's sending it. He's just sending a subtle message to everybody to say, hey, something. This is where we're at. That is, it's about race. That's all. That's what it is.
He's trying. I think he's trying to deflect the conversation from
Yeah,
actual,
no,
from
exactly,
merit,
exactly.
and from and everything that has been going on. But
That's their Jurita,
that
that's their default mechanism. But I know we're wrapping up here, so but it's important for persons to know that behind the veneer of all is well in Guyana, like oh, you mean the one Guyana and so forth, there's a growing discontent among people between the haves and the have-nots.
yeah,
Statements like what Vince said, the vice president made, and so does not help. People are losing their jobs. People can't afford to do the things that they normally do, and they would like someone to blame. And of course, the government would like to say it's the opposition, but they've been in control of the mechanism for 2 years now, so they can't blame the opposition anymore. They can't blame the elections anymore. So they're going to the default mechanism, which is putting the ethnicities against each other. It's a very, very dangerous game in which they're going down at the moment.
I wonder how they're gonna explain what happening with the rice farmers.
The rice farmers mean the sugar,
sugar,
the sugar
fishermen.
workers. You know what I mean? The fisher folk. I mean, it's not. It has nothing to do with race. They can't. They've made hundreds of unrealistic promises. They're the money that the country is making is going to a very select few, and not even the old, as they said, the old guard PPP stalwart is Bharat Jagdeo and this new cabal of Niveau rich and Nouveau rich persons. So they're who are getting the money. The old traditional PP supporters, you would have thought, well, all right, they're not.
Yeah,
And it's so bad. On one hand, Irfan Ali is getting up and say the contractors are doing a piss poor job. Sorry, I can't use that word. A very poor job because there's no workers. But on the other hand, the vice president is flying up to countries in the week, and people are complaining there's no work. So on one hand, the president is saying that we can't find workers. On the other hand, when you actually go on the ground, people are saying they can't find jobs. So what the vice president is, he's creating 800 temporary jobs. How silly is that? You mean you would have thought that if there was a labor shortage, people would not be complaining and thought they don't have any job.
yeah,
But that's what they do. You know what I mean? The sugar workers there, you know what I mean? I don't know how long you will keep holding your breath, because right now, what you're doing is treading water. You're holding your breath, waiting for them to throw you their lifeline. It's not coming.
yeah.
It's not coming. So therefore, folks, make some serious decisions for yourself on what you want to do in the future. If you want to diversify, go into agriculture and those things, start demanding that they put more money into agriculture, into your area, rather than going to build a Mila Falls and the gas shore project. That 900 million US dollars, you know what I mean? They can't fix Gaisuko. Let them take some of that money, the oil money, and make it work for you. Don't keep holding your breath. Sugar is not coming back. They sold off and more.
They lied.
They
They
lied. It's not,
lied.
and then you can't allow them to keep lying for you. Demand better now. Say fair enough. You lied to me. You ain't bringing back sugar, but take some of this oil money here, so, and put it into agriculture, put it into my community, put it into Berbice, and let us have a good life.
Yeah, well, guys, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we definitely this discussion has been very in depth. I want to thank Dr. Vincent Adams and Mr. David Patterson for the input to this discussion this evening, and I encourage persons to share this information so that more persons will be able to benefit from it. But in just wrapping up everything that was said, it's clear that the PPP administration, as is right now, is not doing anything possible to protect the people of this country. Protect your health, protect your finances, or any of that sort. So we will continue to bring you the information as raw as we can possibly bring it to you. That is as credible as it can get. Although, guys, we encourage you to be vigilant, continue to speak out. And as it pertains to utilization of race, that is something I always speak out against. And I'm going to close by saying, regardless of what ethnicity you are, if you are in the rice sector, sugar sector, if you are or if your family depends on the fishing industry, you are being affected tremendously right now, regardless of what ethnicity you are, regardless of whether or not you supported the PPP administration at the last election, or you supported them in theory or practice or whatever. So these are real issues that we are bringing to you, and we need you to understand that you deserve better. As people, you deserve your standard of living to be lifted, especially now that our country is having more resources than we have ever seen before. So we will continue to advocate and fight on your behalf. But until then, we encourage you to join the Alliance on the Move program every Saturday evening at 8 p.m. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening, guys.
All right, thank you, Rita. Thank you, Vince. Thank you
Hey,
very much.
thanks, folks, and thanks for the listeners. Get your friends and relatives and your neighbors and everybody to listen every Monday night every Saturday night to get the truth. To get the truth.
Good night, everyone.